A flight landed safely in the U.S., but one crew member never walked off. No crash. No search. No police report. The airline called it voluntary, sealed the file, and moved on. Years later, a single record surfaced that proved someone wanted this disappearance ignored. And that's when everything unraveled. Before we begin, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Stories like this don't get told on the evening news, and when they do, they're often buried, rushed, or quietly forgotten. Second, like this video. It helps push these stories to people who still believe the truth matters, even decades later. And finally, stay until the end, because this case does not end where you think it does. In the late 1990s, a routine domestic flight crossed U.S. airspace and vanished from public memory. Not because it crashed, not because it exploded, but because the people involved were quietly erased. The official explanation was neat, comfortable, and deeply wrong. Families were told to move on. Records were sealed. And one name, just one, kept appearing in places it didn't belong. This is a story about a disappearance that wasn't treated as a crime. About a person everyone believed they understood, until the truth flipped everything upside down. And about how a single discovery, years later, exposed a lie hiding in plain sight. This isn't just a mystery. It's an injustice. Let's begin. On the morning of October 12, 1998, a regional passenger flight departed from Denver, Colorado, headed for Kansas City, Missouri. It was the kind of short-haul trip flown dozens of times a day. No weather warnings, no mechanical red flags, no reason for anyone to remember it years later. The aircraft landed on time. Passengers disembarked. The plane was refueled, cleaned, and scheduled for its next route. But one person never made it off that flight. According to the manifest, Jordan Calloway, a senior flight attendant with over a decade of experience, was assigned to the crew that day. Jordan had checked in. Jordan had cleared security. Jordan had been seen boarding by 2 co-workers. But when the crew assembled post-flight, Jordan wasn't there. At first, supervisors assumed something simple. Maybe Jordan had exited early, caught a ride, or stepped away for a personal emergency. These things happened. No alarm was raised. No report was filed. By the end of the day, Jordan Calloway was marked as absent without explanation. By the end of the week, the airline quietly classified the incident as a voluntary disappearance. And just like that, a person vanished, without a crash, without a search, without urgency. To understand why Jordan Calloway's disappearance raised so few alarms, you have to understand how Jordan was seen by everyone around them. Jordan was reliable, quiet, professional to the point of being forgettable. Co-workers described Jordan as someone who kept to themselves, rarely joined post-flight dinners, and avoided workplace gossip. That distance, in hindsight, became the perfect camouflage. Official records listed Jordan as male, age 36, single, no children, no criminal history. Human resources files painted a clean, unremarkable life. No disciplinary actions, no financial distress, no known conflicts. When supervisors attempted to reach Jordan, calls went straight to voicemail. Emails bounced back unanswered. Family contact information led nowhere. The listed emergency contact, a distant cousin in Nevada, claimed they hadn't spoken to Jordan in years and assumed the airline must have made a mistake. When a missing person report was finally suggested, it was dismissed internally. The logic was simple and deeply flawed. Adults leave all the time. If Jordan wanted to disappear, that was their right. Within a month, Jordan's employee file was quietly closed. No law enforcement agency opened a case. No airline-wide alert was issued. And no one questioned how a trained flight attendant could vanish mid-duty without a single verified sighting afterward. Jordan Calloway didn't just disappear. They were written off. For nearly 6 years, Jordan Calloway's name sat untouched in airline archives, until a routine internal audit forced someone to look closer. In 2004, the airline transitioned to a new digital employee record system. Old paper files were scanned, cross-checked, and standardized. During that process, an analyst noticed something small, almost insignificant. Jordan's employment documents didn't line up. The Social Security number on file had been issued in California, yet Jordan's birth certificate, photocopied and barely legible, listed a hospital in Ohio. That alone wasn't unusual. People moved. Records got messy. But then came the photo. Jordan's employee ID image didn't match any government-issued photo attached to the file. The jawline was different. The ears didn't match. Even the height listed on the ID was inconsistent across documents. When the analyst flagged the discrepancies, a supervisor advised them to leave closed cases alone. Jordan wasn't an active employee. There was no open investigation. Reopening the file could create liability. The analyst dropped the issue, but saved copies. Around the same time, an aviation blogger stumbled across a strange footnote in archived flight logs. A crew member marked present at departure, but missing at arrival. No incident report. No explanation. The name attached to that anomaly: Jordan Calloway. And for the first time, someone outside the airline asked the question no one wanted to answer. What really happened on that flight? In the summer of 2006, nearly 8 years after Jordan Calloway vanished, a woman in Flagstaff, Arizona contacted a local journalist with a story she wasn't sure she believed herself. She claimed she had seen Jordan. The woman, a motel front desk clerk, said a guest checked in using the name Evan Mercer. The man paid in cash, avoided eye contact, and stayed only one night. What unsettled her wasn't his behavior. It was his face. She had recently watched a short documentary about airline disappearances, and the resemblance was immediate and disturbing. She described Evan as shorter than Jordan's listed height, with softer facial features and a faint surgical scar along the jaw. When the journalist compared motel security footage with Jordan's employee photo, the similarities were impossible to ignore. But there was a problem. Evan Mercer's ID was real. The Social Security number checked out. The address existed. Every database returned a clean record, dating back before Jordan Calloway was ever hired by the airline. If Evan Mercer was Jordan, then Jordan's identity hadn't been created to escape something. It had been created to replace someone else. Before the journalist could publish the story, Evan Mercer vanished, checking out hours earlier than scheduled, leaving behind a room with the sheets stripped and the trash emptied. No fingerprints. No DNA. No forwarding trail. Just a single, impossible question. Who was Jordan Calloway before the flight? As the motel sighting quietly circulated among investigative circles, one detail stood out more than the rest. Evan Mercer's identity was older than Jordan Calloway's. Public records showed Evan Mercer had been issued a Social Security number in 1982, attended a community college in New Mexico, and even had a short-term marriage on file that ended in divorce in the early 1990s. Jordan Calloway, meanwhile, didn't appear in any database until 1996, just 2 years before being hired by the airline. That timeline made no sense. Digging deeper, a private investigator uncovered something even stranger. The birth certificate attached to Evan Mercer's record had been amended, legally updated after a hospital clerical error. The original document listed the baby as female. That amendment occurred in 1995. Around the same time Jordan Calloway's identity appeared for the first time. This wasn't a case of someone stealing an identity to disappear. It was someone splitting themselves in two, one identity to live and another to work. But why would a person go to such lengths? And why choose a job that required constant documentation, travel logs, and background checks? The answer began to form when a sealed court record was finally unsealed in Missouri, tied to a name no one had connected before. A name that never appeared on any airline manifest. and a crime that predated the flight by nearly a decade. The unsealed court record came from Jackson County, Missouri, dated 1989. It detailed a violent assault case involving a 20-year-old suspect named Lena Hartwell. Lena was accused of attacking her employer during a late-night shift at a roadside diner. The victim survived. Lena was arrested, charged, and released on bail pending trial. Then, she vanished. At the time, police believed Lena had fled the state. A warrant was issued, but the case went cold within a year. There were no confirmed sightings, no arrests, and no known relatives willing to cooperate. What investigators never realized was that Lena hadn't disappeared. She had transitioned. Medical records, protected for years under privacy laws, revealed Lena Hartwell legally changed her gender in the mid-1990s. Shortly afterward, the amended birth certificate appeared. Evan Mercer existed on paper. Jordan Calloway followed soon after. 2 identities. 2 lives. 1 person. But the most chilling detail came from the airline's internal roster. Jordan Calloway had specifically requested routes that passed through Missouri, again and again. Short domestic flights. Quick turnarounds. Minimal scrutiny. Jordan wasn't hiding from the past. Jordan was circling it. And the flight on October 12, 1998, wasn't random. It was the last time Jordan could move freely before something, or someone, caught up. 4 years, the assumption was simple. Jordan Calloway walked off that plane and vanished. But when investigators finally re-examined the Kansas City arrival records, the timeline began to fracture. Security footage from the terminal, long thought erased, had partially survived on a mislabeled backup tape. The footage showed the crew exiting the jet bridge. One by one, faces passed the camera. Jordan never appeared. Instead, another crew member paused near the service corridor, briefly blocking the view. When the frame cleared, the hallway was empty. Maintenance logs revealed something even more disturbing. The aircraft was flagged that evening for a lavatory plumbing issue. Mechanics accessed a sealed service panel beneath the rear restroom, one that connected to a narrow cargo-adjacent compartment rarely inspected during routine turnarounds. No report explained why that panel was opened. Airport access logs showed a private medical transport vehicle entering the restricted service area less than 30 minutes after landing. No patient name was recorded. No destination listed. What investigators now believe is chilling. Jordan didn't leave the airport as Jordan. Jordan left sedated, concealed, and undocumented, using Evan Mercer's identity. The disappearance wasn't impulsive. It was scheduled. In 2011, construction crews renovating an abandoned warehouse outside Independence, Missouri, made a discovery that briefly made local headlines, and then vanished from public conversation just as quickly. Behind a false concrete wall, workers found human remains wrapped in insulation and plastic. No personal belongings. No identification. Just bones and fragments of clothing consistent with airline-issued uniforms from the late 1990s. Dental records were inconclusive. DNA databases produced no immediate matches. Within weeks, the remains were officially classified as John Doe, cause of death undetermined, estimated time of death, 12 to 15 years prior. But a retired forensic technician noticed something others missed. The skeletal structure showed signs of prior orthopedic surgery, procedures consistent with gender-affirming medical treatment from the 1990s. That detail was quietly omitted from the final report. The technician sent an anonymous tip to a journalist who had been tracking the Calloway case for years. When the clothing fibers were re-examined, they matched uniforms issued to Jordan Calloway's airline division. The conclusion seemed obvious. Jordan had been murdered. The case was quietly closed. But there was just one problem. The remains didn't belong to Jordan. They belonged to someone else entirely. When the remains were quietly labeled as Jordan Calloway, the airline, local authorities, and even federal agencies were relieved. A body meant closure. Closure meant no more questions. But one forensic inconsistency refused to disappear. The estimated height of the remains was nearly 4 inches shorter than Jordan's medical records. The dental work didn't match either. What did match were records tied to an unsolved missing person case from 1997, a woman named Marissa Vane, a temporary contractor who vanished after filing a harassment complaint against a private medical transport company. That company's name appeared once before, buried in airport access logs from the night Jordan disappeared. Investigators now believe Marissa Vane was used as a substitute. Her body staged, concealed, and later found to give Jordan's disappearance a final answer. The orthopedic surgery marks, not Jordan's transition, but Marissa's spinal operation following a workplace injury. It was the perfect misdirection. By assigning the wrong body to the right name, the system protected itself. No airline liability. No reopened assault case. No exposure of how restricted airport access had been abused. Jordan Calloway, once Lena Hartwell, was officially declared dead. But Evan Mercer was very much alive. And in 2019, a routine traffic stop in Oregon proved it. On a rain-soaked highway outside Eugene, Oregon, a state trooper pulled over a pickup truck for a broken taillight in 2019. The driver handed over a license without hesitation. Evan Mercer. The name triggered nothing. No warrants. No alerts. Just another middle-aged man with an out-of-state plate and a clean record. But the trooper noticed something odd. Evan corrected the officer when referred to as "Sir," quietly but firmly, then said nothing more. The stop ended uneventfully. But the body cam footage later surfaced during a routine audit and was flagged by a facial recognition test being quietly piloted across state databases. The system returned a partial match, not to Jordan Calloway, but to Lena Hartwell. By the time investigators arrived in Oregon, Evan Mercer was gone. The address on file led to an empty rental. The neighbors described a quiet person who paid cash, avoided conversation, and moved every few years. No arrest was ever made. The assault case from 1989 remains officially unsolved. Jordan Calloway remains legally deceased. Evan Mercer remains legally alive. And somewhere in the United States, a person exists who successfully escaped their past by becoming someone the system didn't want to look too closely at. Not a ghost. A loophole. If this story unsettled you, it should have. Because this wasn't about one disappearance, it was about how easily institutions choose convenience over truth. How a system designed to protect people can be manipulated to erase them. And how closure can be manufactured when accountability feels too expensive. If Jordan Calloway's name had never been questioned, this case would have stayed buried behind paperwork and concrete walls. And that raises a terrifying thought. How many other stories ended the same way, without a YouTube video, without a second look? If you believe these stories deserve daylight, subscribe to this channel. If you think victims shouldn't be replaced by paperwork, like this video. And if you have a theory, or you think you've seen someone connected to this case, leave a comment. Someone is always listening. Share this story. Talk about it. Question the official version. Because the truth doesn't disappear. It just waits for someone brave enough to dig.